call to order this meeting of the Georgetown Board of Supervisors. I'll now refer to Mr. Christopher Parker, Chairman of the Georgetown Planning Commission.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hereby call this September 15th joint meeting for Supervisors of the Planning Commission Board. We do have a form record.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, and thank you, staff, for the switcheroo. Thanks very much. All right, do we have any amendments to the agenda? Very good. We'll move forward with public comment. Citizens are afforded the opportunity to provide public comment. Staff, do we have the podium? Is that where they should report this evening? To the microphone at the podium? And is it on? Okay, very good. You will have 3 minutes to provide your comment. Is anyone here in the audience wishing to come forward and provide public comment? Please do so now. And please remember to state your name and address. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Adam Simonoff, 5340 Gordon Drive, King George, Virginia, 22485. Okay, here's what I'm going to read to you. I believe you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That means giving respect as a good neighbor. When somebody chooses to own property in a high-density community, they make both a legal and a social contract with the community. A business that asks for commercial zoning accommodations is making a social contract with the community. The role of the government is to represent the interests of the community without conflicts of interest. If I'm the government and you ask me for a commercial zoning and building permit for a shopping center, I have an expectation for you, the landlord, to provide affordable lease space for retail businesses that hire people from the community. If you fail to maintain occupancy of the retail spaces, I lose tax income that you, the landlord, should compensate me, the government, for. I could have had attractive forested land or another income-generating property owner. If all your shops are leased, your tenant business owners would make taxable sales and your employees would pay me income tax. Vacant retail space only pays me property tax for your land and the building, a fraction of what you owe me for zoning and building permit for you. Further, your empty stores are blighting the community, driving other businesses and residents away, depressing property values, further declining my tax revenue as a government. For this reason, the government must raise tax on empty commercial space. If you own a commercial fixer-upper in a high-density neighborhood, you should be required to turn it into a building suitable for human occupancy by a definite date. Half-built, safe, unusable structures are blighted properties that hurt a community. For this reason, the government must crack down on blighted commercial structures. If you want to build a restaurant in a residential neighborhood where a restaurant didn't previously exist, then the request must be denied on the basis of the expected increased traffic and noise it will generate. Zoning must enforce this. A 400-home community was turned away based upon the expected increased traffic it would generate, even though it had access to a main road and was not in a high-density area. The development should have been approved after good faith negotiations with public SWOT analysis to show the county gains revenue. Clean water, first responders, and great schools aren't free. The government has to be pro-growth to raise revenue as costs rise and the human population grows. Zone smartly for growth so proper traffic and environmental concerns are satisfied. Create tax incentives to jumpstart economic development. Define economic development zones. Use taxes as a carrot and a stick to encourage growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simonoff. Anyone else here in the boardroom wishing to provide public comment, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, Mr. Dines, do you have anyone online who wishes to speak? Thank you. Board members, commissioners, does anyone have email correspondence requested to be read into the record? No? All right, I'll now close public comment. Before we move on to the presentation by the Berkeley Group, I thought we'd take a moment and introduce everyone. And so I'd like our guests from the Berkeley Group to go first, please, then the members of the Planning Commission, and then the Board of Supervisors and staff. Go ahead.
Rebecca Cobb with the Berkeley Group.
Stephanie Mathena with the Berkeley Group.
Welcome. Thanks for coming tonight. My name is Chris Parker. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Bryan.
Ross DeVries, Dahlgren District Planning Commission.
Walt Moss, James Madison District.
I think we're dead on the mics here too.
Sorry about that.
Gary Kendrick, Planning Commission at large.
Gabbro, Planning Commission, Shiloh District.
Monroe.
Joe DeCorda, Planning Commission, Dahlgren District.
Jeff Stonehill, Board of Supervisors, Dahlgren District.
Annie Kupka, at-large supervisor chairman.
Kathy Bender, Board of Supervisors, Shiloh District.
Jeff Bush, James Monroe District Board of Supervisors.
Heather Hall, Director of Community Development, Zoning Administrator.
Louis Pancotti, Senior Planner.
Chris Miller, County Administrator.
Ken Golsky, Deputy County Attorney.
All right, I think that's everyone. Yes? So we'll go ahead and move on with our presentation from the Berkeley Group. Again, welcome. Thank you for being here.
So I do have a, wow, this mic is a little more sensitive.
I don't know.
So we do have a presentation tonight. Again, I am Rebecca Cobb with the Berkeley Group, and I'll kick us off, and then Stephanie Mathena is going to take over for a little bit as well. All right. So I was talking with the county administrator, and we agreed that, you know, right now we're looking at each other as strangers, very new faces. But through this process, we're definitely going to get to know one another. And we really look forward to getting to know your community. So thank you for having us tonight. Tonight, we'd like to first kind of do an overview of the project and talk about the schedule. And I'm going to be handling that. And then Stephanie Mathena is going to talk about the project intent, talk about, you know, what is the purpose of a zoning ordinance and what's typically in a zoning ordinance for anybody who may not be familiar with that. And then we'll look at your comprehensive plan goals, because your comprehensive plan fits as a guide for your zoning ordinance and your subdivision ordinance. And so we'll talk about and kind of highlight a few of the goals and the things that we noticed in your comprehensive plan. And then we'll look at the diagnostic review. We have reviewed your zoning ordinance, subdivision ordinance, and also took a look at your comprehensive plan and put together a report for you on what we found through talking with staff and then reviewing the documents. We're going to talk about community engagement. That's a very important part of this process. And so we'll get into some details with that, and then get into next steps and keys to success. At the end of this, we'll also have a little bit of time for discussion. We want to get the Planning Commission and the board's thoughts, just kind of if there's any hot pressing items on your mind. And so we'll hear from you tonight as well. So project overview, you can kind of think of this project kind of in three phases, and we're at the beginning phase right now, which is investigation. We've already kicked off with staff. They shared their concerns, the things that they like about the ordinances, the things that they don't like about the ordinances, some of their goals and objectives with this project. And then we went into document review. Again, you have a report that talks about that review and what we found. And then we're at the joint Planning Commission and Board work session where we can talk about what we've done so far and how we're going to be moving forward and get everyone comfortable with the project. And then continuing in investigation is public outreach. And we're doing a very robust public outreach. There are going to be 4 stakeholder sessions, 2 public workshops, and a public survey that will be open for about a month to allow the community time to think about and answer any questions from that survey. And Stephanie is going to talk about that a little bit more too. And then the next phase is the content development. So we start out with this investigation, getting the public input, getting information from your ordinances, from your staff, and we use that to start drafting the various sections of the ordinance that you see listed here. So permits, district standards, your uses, any standards that should go with the uses. Community design standards are things like signs, lighting, landscaping, your subdivision article, because we will be pulling your subdivision ordinance into this document, making it one ordinance that works together, and then definitions. And so as we draft those, we bring those to the Planning Commission for review to say, this is what we've drafted based on our knowledge and based on what we heard from public input. And then we hear your input and any revisions that you want to make. And then we move to the next section and so on. And once all of that is drafted, we go into adoption. But we don't like to just throw out the ordinance and say, here it is, let's adopt it. So we do have another opportunity for public engagement through a public open house. We provide the full ordinance so that the public can review it, provide any questions, provide any comments, and then we bring that back to you all. And that's a time when we may transition to joint meetings again so that the board can get up to speed on where we've been, where we've come through, and then see, okay, and here is what the public has to say. And so maybe do we want to make some additional tweaks, fine tune that document? And then we can move into the adoption through the public hearings. So project schedule, here we are at the joint kickoff meeting at the start of this. And then we're going to move into that public engagement through the fall. We're looking at the month of October, November is going to be that public engagement. And then towards the end of fall and through to early spring 2023. So that's a long time. Like I say, we're really going to get to know each other. We will be having bi-monthly work sessions and drafting your ordinance. So taking it phase by phase, section by section, drafting, making edits, drafting the next section. And then we have that refinement that I was talking about where we'll have that open house for the public to review the full document. And then we'll have another work session. That's when the board will come back in and join us in spring 2023. And then we'll finish up in summer 2023 with a brand new shiny ordinance to utilize. So project intent, I'll hand it over to Stephanie.
Scared to get too close. Is this good? Too loud? Okay. We'll just paint some broad brushstrokes here about, again, what a zoning ordinance is, what a subdivision ordinance is, which I'm sure everyone in this room is well aware of, and then just sort of the goals of the project. And then we'll have some time for open discussion to talk about the survey, which hopefully you've had a chance to review, and then the diagnostics as well. So the current ordinances, both the zoning and subdivision, are largely compliant with state code. Lots of optional provisions are included. It's a pretty robust document, certainly compared to other localities, but there is some room for improvement, just some small measures that can modernize it, streamline it, and update it a bit. So most of the recommendations that are found in those diagnostics are to serve to this point up here. It's to get some additional compliance with the Code of Virginia. Again, largely compliant, especially in the measures that really matter. But some things could be streamlined or updated to reflect the newest changes. Clarify some language. This could be provisions and definitions or standards. Address modern zoning and subdivision issues. I know it's been 87. It's been a while. So just to get some modern practices in there, some best practices that could be uses, parking, environmental measures, stuff like that. Consider some more zoning flexibility to make things a little easier on staff, a little easier on you all, and of course to make it more accessible to the folks that may not deal with the ordinances that often. And then just revise it to make sure that the comprehensive plan is shining through these documents as it should be. All right, ordinance relationships. So again, as you know, the comp plan really sets the stage for your ordinances. They work together to guide the character of the community, the vision, and ultimately good and decent regulation. The comp plan usually addresses things like land use, housing, transportation, that sort of thing, facilities, and then your ordinances come through to really push it across the finish line. So again, as you know, zoning ordinance regulate uses, standards. It ensures fair regulation, light and air, those sorts of items. And then the subdivision makes sure that your land is subdivided beautifully, nicely, fairly, effectively. So we took a quick look at your comprehensive plan, which has some really forward thinking and future thinking strategies and policies. So the next two slides only provide a small look at these comprehensive plan strategies and goals. In the land use ordinance evaluation report, you'll find a full matrix that goes over a more robust set. But the common themes that we saw in the comp plan are the preservation of land that seem to be big amongst the recommendations there, providing a variety of housing, whether that's mixed use housing was mentioned a lot, or even just small commercial nodes that allow a little bit of residential uses, just to provide a variety of more housing types and affordability as well. And then of course, protecting the scenic and environmentally sensitive areas of the county seem to be of high importance. This includes things like landscaping and buffering that can come through in the zoning ordinance and the subdivision ordinance to again meet those goals. So these are just two examples here. Again, you'll find a more robust set in your report. It just outlines some things on the left here. Those are the items directly taken from the comp plan. And then the items in the yellow are some recommendations that you can take to, again, see that through. Here's a couple of more here. Again, a lot of getting some uses up to speed, coming into modern times, and just really preserving the rural character. Again, as I've stated a couple of times, the zoning ordinance is generally compliant, major requirements are met, lots of optional provisions. Again, a lot of localities don't take it that far, so you have that leg up, but certainly some room to modernize and streamline. That's the goal of this project, is just to bring the zoning ordinance up to speed and up to date, and include the things that you all have noticed over the last 30 years that are lacking, or either in content, context, effectiveness, etc. Same with the zoning or the subdivision ordinance. Again, just bringing it up to speed and getting to the most modern needs of both the community and the people that are administering this ordinance. Largely compliant, nothing to really call out there, but again, you can have a breakdown in your report. The part that everyone is the most concerned about, community engagement. We have a lot going on. We have three items that will engage the community. First up, we have the survey, which will open on October 1st, and it will run the entire month of October, concurrently with the public workshops and the stakeholder sessions, which are two different items. The public workshops will hold two. We'll hold one here and then one in Dahlgren. Someone will have to tell me which way to say it. It'll be October 20th, the first one, and then October 26th. So a week apart. This is the important thing about the workshops. They're the exact same thing. So if anybody comes and asks you which one they have to go to, if they live in Dahlgren, do they have to go to that one? Whatever is convenient for them. If they go to both, that's great. same exact presentation, same exercise, same content, same conversation. It's just to make sure that we can get to both ends of the county and really make sure everyone has a chance to share their opinion. The workshops will focus on general ideas, really get people to dig into the meat of the ordinance, again, see what's lacking, get some really specific thoughts, whereas the survey is a little bit more general. Again, we encourage everyone to do both, but the survey is there for the folks that can't make it. And another note about the survey, we'll have it online, being 2021, but we also will give it to staff, PDF format to do hard copies, and then they will transmit those to us and we'll input them. So we have hard copy and online. It's easier for folks to do online, but that's a subjective statement, and I know some people like paper. So you have both options. And then finally, we have the Stakeholder Sessions, which will be on October 26th. You have a list on the table there. If you don't mind, you don't have to do it right this second, but it's the list that Heather and Lewis have put together of all the prospective invitees. If there's someone missing, I feel like you will probably let us know. But Heather spent a lot of time putting that together, so hopefully everyone that matters will be on that list. So we can touch base on that in a little bit. Again, if you have any comments about that, we can do that before we leave. And the survey, staff has reviewed and given their green light, but I hope everyone's had a chance to review it, and we can talk about tonight if you have anything you want to add, any questions you want to massage a little bit so that it is a little bit more finessed. And then, again, the stakeholder engagement, it's 4 groups. Each group will have an hour, give or take, to share their piece. And we try to group these stakeholder sessions into groups of like-minded individuals that are either from the same industry, same career, same business, essentially the ones that can have a productive conversation together. So what we've ended up with, and this is on the sheet there in front of you, group 1 will be business owners and then the EDA reps. Group 2 will be bankers, real estate lawyers. We have the Dahlgren reps going in there. Group 3 will be special interest groups, so ag representatives, historic representatives, and any other special groups that you may think of between now and the end of the evening. And then the last group, which is typically the largest, is surveyors, contractors, and architects. And just for everyone's peace of mind here, we have given that group a little bit of cushion at the end of the day. So it's the largest group we have. They should have plenty of time to get their thoughts out and discuss. Those will be held from 10 to 3, again, on October 26th. And then from there, we will go into the second public workshop starting at 6 o'clock. So we'll have a little bit of a break. So if anyone comes to you and asks, they can certainly do both. If they're a stakeholder, they can stick around and do the public workshop as well. It may, just for their and your benefit, to know it will likely be the same conversations, but more public engagement is always better. Next steps for the project. I know we've gone over schedule a little bit, but also in your leaflets there, you should have the full schedule with the tentative target months for each task we're at. Feel free to look at that if you want to, but generally next up, we have the public engagement, which will again be the public survey, workshops, and the stakeholder sessions, which will run over the month of October. And then from there, we will begin drafting the ordinance content over the next 2 years. And we will be coming to the Planning Commission. I think it's over 8 times, 8 work sessions. And like Rebecca said, we'll bring you a little piece at a time so that you don't have to digest the whole meal at once. Those will be fall through spring of 2023. And then we'll have the open house, adopt it, and everyone will be happy and living their best life with this new ordinance. And then I think that wraps us up. Few key things. These seem simple and like I'm preaching to you, but keys to success for this project, especially a long one, is to stay engaged with each other from start to finish. It's where we have those 8 work sessions coming up. It's where we keep you updated with all the public engagement we have. We'll send out summaries so that way you know what's going on at all times. Getting input from staff, which Heather and Lewis have been amazing. They have given us so much direction and feedback already, and we've only just gotten started. And then, of course, identify and communicate with the stakeholders. They really are the framework of the community engagement. They're the experts in the community. And then lastly is just to stay involved and do your homework, which I think you will. It seems like a great group. So here's to the next 2 years, working together and getting you all a new and shiny updated ordinance. And now, without further ado, we could probably just dive into some open discussion. I think up first we have the land use ordinance evaluation report, which hopefully everyone had a chance to review. I'm going back to my seat. Try this one. It's got a green light.
So just when you're looking at that evaluation report and diagnostic, if there were things that we have suggested that you absolutely disagree with, let us know. Because we won't go in that direction if that's something that the group collectively feels strongly, is not good for your community. But so I'll just pause for just a moment to see if anyone has any thoughts or things that they want to share about that land use report that we delivered.
Planning Commission, go ahead.
If I may ask, what's your jumping off point? Like, where did you originally approach it from, or what perspective did you come at it from?
I was just going to say, Rebecca can take over. The first step is just to start with state code and go line by line from the ordinance and state code, which if you look at the matrix, we've tried our best to lay it out so that you can see exactly which state code section it's talking about. That's where we start, is we say, okay, is this legal? Yes or no? And then we go into best practices and that sort of thing.
Supervisors, questions? Go ahead, Mr. Granger.
So looking through the matrix of that table, and in the back, a number of them say currently incorporated by reference may be incorporated specifically. What are the advantages for incorporating it specifically incorporated versus just from the reference? Is there any difference at all? I feel like if you incorporate it specifically, then if it changes and ours no longer align with the state code, then you'd have to be constantly in that case, which is why reference might be more factor. But I think there's any advantages to specifically adopting.
So specifically adopting it makes it a little easier for the public to look at. So they're not having to go and try to figure out how to get to that particular code and read it. Sometimes state code is really hard to read and understand. So we try to put it more kind of in plain English text. So for those are kind of the reasons why it might be beneficial to incorporate.
We specifically adopted and incorporated, and the state code changes and they're no longer in line, then we'd have to make text amendments with the public hearings for the
It is, but I would say even though we're doing this update and this ordinance, overhaul right now, you don't want to do another overhaul. And so we would say, look at your ordinance on an annual basis. State code gets updated annually, and sometimes they add new things. They change the numbers as well, So if a number was referenced, that might change as well. So I would say, update it annually and catch those things then.
I don't have any questions right now.
I'll just use this one real quickly. I have several constituents in my district that had their land subdivided before the 1987 ordinance. And so now they're kind of stuck because they can't subdivide it anymore, and they get confused why they can't for whatever reason. So that is one question I had. Ms. Hall knows she could probably elaborate a little better.
I think what
I
Ms.
know who to
Bender
make.
is trying
I know
to
which one
describe is that parent parcels are defined by pre-87. Everything after 87, 1 to 5 lots since then can be divided. So some people who may have divided all 5 in the 90s have no longer have any division rights. And is that something that we should revisit? Is that okay?
So through this process, we can talk about parent parcel and those types of things, and we can amend the ordinance to handle that differently if that's something that the community wants to do.
That's one question I had, and Ms. Hall said it much better than me because she knows all the fine-tuned language on that one. Thank you.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to be clear. So right now is just questions that we're posing against the land use evaluation, not in general. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, because one of my questions was earlier, the presentation said this was going to be through fall of 2021 to spring of 2023 as far as working on this, community outreach, work sessions, etc. Why such a long duration? Just looking at the land use ordinance evaluation, it's 98 pages, which has me contemplating why is it so big? I think we're at the point to where you spoke earlier to state code, there's federal regulations, there's Chesapeake Bay Water Act. All that is applicable, and I understand that, but there are also self-imposed regulations that maybe we should be looking at. So would it behoove us to look at what is imposed by the county, remove the I really don't see any merit in going through what's imposed by the Fed, what's imposed by the state. Those are things out of our control. But those things within our realm of control, I think, is what we need to focus on. And honestly, as far as my standpoint, and granted, you only have to put up with me till January of this year, but until that point, I would like to look at what is self-imposed by the county and how we can remove some barriers to line up to see our comprehensive plan, which was referenced earlier and signed when I was chairman in 2019. So it's relatively new. See what we can do to bring our comprehensive plan to fruition and remove some of those barriers. So I apologize, Madam Chair, not so much a comment as much as a statement. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Would you like to respond to that?
Sure, I'll respond to that. So through the process, it is lengthy because there are specific sections of the ordinance that we want to take section by section. And we will certainly draft those according to, state code and best practices, and we bring that to the commission, and we let the commission know, hey, this section, there's not a lot you can do because this is state code. But here are portions that are decisions that the county can make. Here are setbacks. Do you want it to increase? Do you want it to be less? Here are acreage requirements. Those types of things will be the focus of those bi-monthly meetings. And it is a lot to digest at one time. I mean, these work sessions can be 2 hours of discussion and working through all the topics. And so that's why it takes that long to break it up into bite-sized chunks. That's not going to kill us all in one night and wear us out.
Is that response satisfactory to you, Mr. Bush?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. I do not have any questions. If you wish to carry on, please do so.
I think we're just up to the survey.
So next we would like to have you take a look at the survey, or if you've already taken a look at the survey. Again, we did have staff review this, and we made some tweaks based on the staff suggestions. But we want to know if you have any concerns about any of the questions or any changes.
Stakeholder survey?
The public survey.
So we'll start with Planning Commission first again, please.
I mean, I read it, I didn't see anything that bothered me, it's just trying to draw input out of the community. I like the fact that you sort of had them identify sort of what their, you know, whether they were just a county resident or whether they were a contractor or that, because, you know, I found that everybody comes at the ordinances from a different perspective, and trying to blend them sometimes is difficult. So I thought it was pretty reasonable until somebody showed me something indicates that it's not.
I like it. It's comprehensive plan, which I think is pretty well received. We got a lot of feedback on that. So I bet it was no issue with the wall.
So you're all good then, Mr. Parker? Yes?
Well, one section about top zoning and land use priorities, which naturally reflects the comprehensive plan. I don't see anything about any discussion of cluster development, cluster housing. This is number 3. So infill development that matches community character and design. That could be an aesthetic design question or a question about infill development. Encouraging new housing development. I mean, it's a context-less question.
It's under number 6, isn't it?
Yes, that's what I was trying to
allow cluster residential development.
Yes, question number 6 does have the option to check cluster residential development.
Right, but it really lacks a definition. And cluster development is defined variously in various different resources, and I'm sure it is in the public one as well.
Yeah, and I would say, honestly, that's the case for a lot of the questions. But in order to have it be a survey that, you know, for me, 4 pages seems like a lot. But, you know, if we went into detailing what we mean by agricultural or what we mean by cluster, then, you know, this would be a book that probably no one would crack open. And so, unfortunately, you know, the survey results, you do have to kind of weigh them out and try to find the middle ground there.
Yeah, otherwise, I thought it was a good starting point for open starting discussion to the community.
And the workshops are a place where where you can dive into those specific definitions, or if they don't fully understand what something is. So maybe if somebody sees the survey and they're like, wow, this is so over my head, I'll go to the workshop and ask my questions there.
Are you planning on splitting the, you had like, question 1 was how they fit in the community. Are you going to sort the results by those groups?
Typically, we just do one report. And I think...
It would be interesting to find out if all the residents think differently than
I think we can sort through Excel.
People that live out there.
You did this on SurveyMonkey, right?
Yes.
I think they allow you to sort by category or filter somehow, but I'm not positive.
There's a way that we can do that. We can export it into Excel and do a sort that way if that's something that's desired. I would caution and say, I think some of the appetite might be there that one type of perspective is more important than another. And so I do like to look at the responses collectively and overall percentage of your community. How did they respond on this question? You know, is it 60%? Is it 20%? You know, want this or want that versus each individual type of person.
Well, I concur with the idea that having it split out a constituent group would be helpful, because like I said, the different groups have different perspectives, different attitudes about things. I mean, of course, you know, just on the idea of growth in the county, the developers are going to be pro-development because it means work. The residents, not necessarily. So I would like to see it split out between those 6 constituent groups. And you know, how many responses did you get? What were the responses for that one? If you want to total it up at the end, that's fine, but without breaking it down to the kind of detail, to be honest with you, I'm not sure how valuable.
Especially considering there's an option for advice to work within the county, but they might not even be county residents. We want their opinion, but it'd be nice to know that they feel differently than we live in.
Okay. And like I said, I think that's something that we can do, and we'll take a look at that and see if that's how we can create that report in that fashion.
Other questions from the commission?
All right, then, my colleagues, any questions about the public input survey? Mr. Granger?
No, ma'am. I liked it. I couldn't come up with any other ideas. I do appreciate the planning commission's points, though, and I like that what they brought up, and I would like to see that as well. So, thank you.
Mr. Stonehill?
I thought the survey was pretty good. I haven't seen anything else that.
Ms. Bender?
I have one thing. One question would be, if development would occur, where would citizens want it to be?
It's usually in there. Did we end up cutting that?
The comprehensive plan already addresses that.
Right. But it would be a good survey because if I do my math right, by the time that this would be completed, the comprehensive plan would need to be updated. So it's a good start of the question there, because isn't it, let me correct, it is every 5 years, correct? So I'm just putting it out there, it would be really good to put on the survey.
Are there specific areas known locally? Would you say Kings Highway? What pockets would you want to be asking about?
Well, in our comprehensive plan, we outlined some areas, but I guess the growth is coming, and we have 3 and 301, and especially in the Shiloh district, it is considered the most agricultural and rural. And there's a big divide between residents who are like, I don't want anything, and then some that understand that to do what they want in the county services and infrastructure, there needs to be some development. So instead of a referendum, which some other counties have done, this might be a way to find that answer of where people would be amenable.
Ms. Hall, would you be able to work with us to specify some areas? Okay.
So you could start with the current settlement districts that were adopted in the 2019 comprehensive plan. And I don't know if it would allow you have other places where you have a box, other, please specify, and then maybe you make that as an additional option.
Are those the primary settlement districts?
Yes. Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Can y'all hear me? Does this work? Okay, mic's dead. Thank you, Madam Chair. So first off, yes, the strategic primary settlement areas were identified in the comprehensive plan. That was done through multiple town halls and engagement with the public. So I think that question has been answered. That's fairly recent. So our comprehensive plan is something that needs to be not just uses something that looks good on paper, but actually as a focal point and a reference point. I'd also like to remind us that 80 to 90% of King George County is zoned A2. So when we're talking about development, you know, we constantly hear every time that a project or development comes to before the board or before the planning commission that we don't want to become Stafford County or something to that nature. But the truth of the matter is we're 80 to 90% A2. We're not. We've already identified those strategic areas. But to the questions at hand. So survey questions. First off, thank you to the Planning Commission and the members that are here tonight. I really appreciate your dedication and your service to the county. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate you being here tonight. So to the survey questions. Question number 2. So which of the following best describes your experience with King George County zoning and subdivision ordinances? We were just told in the presentation this evening that we're robust. That's the word that was utilized, robust in comparison to other localities. So that should tell us where our zoning ordinance currently is, robust. I translate that to overregulation. That's something that I would like to look at in a local effort to look and see what we can reel back. Again, question number 3, select your top zoning and land use priorities for King George County. Again, we're 80% to 90% zoned A2 in King George County currently. Bear with me 1 minute, I apologize. Going to question 11, overlays, a military overlay district. I believe that this was something that we had really discussed in depth during not only our comprehensive plan review, but also our economic development strategic plan review. And it's my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, that we've already put the parameters for a military overlay district within there. Is that not correct? Correct.
Testing. All right, this one works.
Thank you.
We have them in our comprehensive plan, and that's part. So what initiated that was our JLUS, our joint land use study, which unfortunately was many years ago. Then we uploaded it, put it into our comprehensive plan, and now we need to include it into our zoning ordinance so it's enforceable. So in working with Dahlgren, which they've gone through some changes as far as their planning liaison, Mr. Hastings is actually in the audience here tonight. He is our new planning liaison, so I'm excited to work with him to get that together. But we have been kind of waiting and working over the changes at Dahlgren to get those military overlay points that they need and what exactly they want to see in it. So we plan to work with their planning liaison and the Berkeley Group staff to put that together and include that in our ordinance so it's enforceable.
So we had these discussions, pretty in-depth discussions 2 years ago, and it was put in our comprehensive plan, but here we are and it's still not enforceable. So I'm glad that we're moving forward on that. But again, pointing to the timeline that we're looking at as far as redoing these ordinances, we're looking at 2023, which puts us from having the discussions with Dahlgren and discussing a military overlay district prior to 2019 when the comprehensive plan was signed. Now we're not even looking at it being enforceable till post 2023. I find that problematic, and I think that's something maybe we need to jump to the top. Just my humble opinion. Last thing that I have, question number 13 on the survey. I would like to extend stakeholder group 2 that was presented earlier in the slide deck to include military or DOD contractors, not just Dahlgren, the base proper, but if you look outside of Dahlgren, if you look out by Walmart, all that development, we have a lot of defense contractors and potential for more. And if we're talking about, I mean, every time people and developers have come before you on the Planning Commission and before us on the Board of Supervisors, we need more business. We don't need more residents. Well, here's an opportunity to get more businesses. So I think that the defense contractor community is something we need to consider in group 2 of what was presented earlier. Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. So specifically with regard to the military overlay district comment you made, I mean, no disrespect, sir, but you have been on this board for 4 years, and it is our obligation to hold ourselves to that. So I don't think tonight is the night to either point the finger at staff or point the finger at our consultants here developing this plan for us. It's going to be done. I realize you're not going to be on the board by the time it's done, but they have 2 months worth of stakeholder and citizen public meetings, and then we have the holidays. No one's going to want to meet over the holidays to do this stuff, right? And they've already illustrated the fact that they're looking at a minimum of 8 meetings with the Planning Commission, 8 workshops. That's probably 8 months just for workshops with our Planning Commission. And then they're going to need time to write it, and then time to bring it back to us and have public hearings and more stakeholder meetings on it. So I get where you're coming from. I hear that you're frustrated with the timeline, but they were very realistic with us when they put in the bid for this, that this was probably going to be an 18-month process. So I think we really need to give them the time that they need to get this done for us. Not yet. I'm not finished. Thank you. So can you go back, Mr. Dines, to number 2 and number 3, please? So number 2, to your point, Mr. Bush, you're saying that our consultants stated that our ordinances are robust, but I'm not sure I'm understanding what point you're trying to make otherwise about that. Can you go ahead and elaborate, please?
Absolutely. So the comment was our ordinances are robust in comparison. In other words, that in comparison to our regional partners in other localities, our self-imposed ordinances, local ordinances, are maybe more intrusive, I guess would be the word, maybe not, but more more engaged with a developer or someone who would be looking to do something within the county than other localities would be. So that's what I mean, because it wasn't just that it was robust, it was robust in comparison. That's what I was focusing on, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. Granger, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So when I read to, I understand the idea that it's robust, but I guess the question is, even if it's robust, is it easy to understand? Is it average to understand, or is it difficult to understand? Just because there's a lot there doesn't mean it's hard to understand necessarily. I think this is more speaking to maybe the language and is in layman's terms and things along those lines. I don't know if you're asking for another question that might be asking the citizens if they think we have too much regulation or not enough regulation. Is that what you're trying to ask, Mr. Bush? I understand where you come from, Mr. Bush, and what your opinion is. I'm just asking, are you asking for a question along those lines?
That's a completely different question. So I guess I agree with Mr. Granger. What is it that you're trying to get at here? Are you trying to get a question that asks citizens and developers, do you find our current zoning ordinance cumbersome, or?
Exactly. Is it too cumbersome? So if, let's say Jay Smith doesn't have an engineering degree, wants to build a back deck on his house and maybe pull in a double wide trailer for his niece or his daughter, can he do that on his own by reading our ordinances, or does he have to engage counsel to interpret our ordinances to tell him what he has to do? Or does this individual have to visit our community development office on 6 different occasions to get clarity how the process works, because the ordinance itself is too cumbersome or too involved, etc.?
Thank you, Mr. Granger.
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm hearing different things from you now, because that does sound like question 2 to me. The ease to understand the ordinance, whereas before I got the impression you were looking for, is there too much ordinance? Is there too many regulations in place? I know you're in favor of reducing it, but just because there's a lot of ordinances in place, a lot of regulation doesn't mean it's hard to understand. So we have one question asking about the ease to understand, and that's here, which goes to that what you were just speaking to. Are you also saying you want another question just asking specifically, is there too much regulation? Is there not enough regulation?
So I was tying the two together in that, one, it may be a little cumbersome to translate for the average layman who's going through these ordinances. And two, because of the size and scope of the regulations, there's a lot to digest. In comparison, going back to the original comment, robust in comparison. So it's a lot to take in, and it's not so easy to translate. I hope that helps.
So if I may I?
Please.
I want to clear up robust when we say robust and what we saw when we looked at the ordinance. It's not in comparison that there's so much more regulation than other localities similar to you or around you or anything like that. It's that even though you have an ordinance that was written in the 80s, you actually still have a lot of state code items in there. Usually when we're stepping into this process with an ordinance that is that old, it maybe have been band-aided a little bit, most of the time fairly unsuccessfully. But what we see with your ordinance is that your Band-Aids have worked. You do have the state code in there that you need to have on a whole, kind of looking at the big picture. And so that's what we mean, that even though it's old, it isn't a piece of garbage at this point, really, honestly. And so that's what we mean by robust, is that you have done a really good job of making amendments and putting in some of the newer uses, those types of things, some standards for uses. Those are things that when we usually walk into this process with a community, we go, wow, there's so much missing. And you guys don't have that. You have successfully put in things over the years.
Compliance.
Yes.
It's robust relative to expectations for compliance with the state.
Yes.
Not necessarily robust, meaning it's overbuilt. That's not what the comment meant. I'm saying it is or it is.
Right, yeah. The comment was not about the specific regulations, it's about your compliance with state code.
If I could just say, county staff has done a good job over the years informing us of the changes in the law, things that need to be added. And revision of the ordinances is an ongoing kind of thing. I see this as a comprehensive review, just clean everything up and get a fresh start. Okay. If it's lengthy, it is because we tried to put enough detail and explanation in there so that it's clear what can be done and what can't be done. And you're right. Sometimes I think certain sections of our ordinances could be worded a little differently to make them more understandable by the layman. But at the same time, you've got to have detail in order to enforce it and to achieve what we're trying to achieve.
So my only other comment on number 3 is just because whatever percentage of our land mass is zoned a certain way, it does not invalidate the need for us to obtain citizen input. So I feel that even though it is written a certain way right now, we still need to get citizen input because, as Ms. Bender said, there may be an opportunity by the time this is done to make whatever adjustments we deem necessary.
Well, and we have a significant amount of development in A2 areas as far as by right subdivisions as well. So that's also something. And if I may add, when I was getting my planning commissioner certification, one of the things that we had to do was go to various localities and look at their planning commission. So I went to one east of us and it was pretty sleepy. And I went to one west of us that was basically, they were trying to get the cat back in the bag, right? They had areas that they were trying to rezone, downzone, regentrify. And I come away with it thinking, you know, we've still got the strategic advantage of, we've only got not quite 28,000 people, right? 180 square miles. We've got the advantage of being able to still strategically let the cat out of the bag. And this, to Mr. Kendrick's point, is a good way to comprehensively address it in a fashion that is real time. It's current, and it does coincide with when we'll have our next strategic plan or a comprehensive plan. So I think it's a great opportunity, and I think we're, you know, again, I look at this as, you know, it's going to be evolving, right? But this is a great kickoff. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Would you all like to move on to your stakeholder interview questions? Is that next?
Madam Chair, can I just?
Yes, go ahead.
It is a legal question that may be in the consultancy agreement and can be covered between now and October 1st, but has the consideration of FOIA implications, Freedom of Information Act implications been taken into account on the surveys? Because I know that email addresses are requested and being collected. Has that issue been discussed, or we just need to further discuss that as time goes on?
Yeah, so our reason for asking for the emails, what I'll say is we will collect that as a list and provide it to staff so that if someone has said, yes, I want to be updated as things move on, then they can send those folks an email to say, this is, you know, the next work session date, or this is the public open house. In terms of FOIA, we may need to speak with you about that a little bit more. If you got some concerns, we're happy to talk to you about that.
Thank you, Mr. Golsky. All right, then.
So yes, stakeholders, if you've got any suggestions, you know, I don't feel like we need to throw names out during this meeting tonight. But what I would suggest is if you feel like there is someone missing on the list that you know, has some great information, some great input, or would like to be involved as a stakeholder, get that information to staff and they can work on the list and fine tune the list for us. We are trying to keep it into kind of intimate small groups because, as you know, managing a meeting, you know, with this many folks and is difficult, and we want to make sure that there is good conversation, productive conversation. So, you know, we try to keep it to 10 or so people, preferably less than that, just because it is only an hour. And if one person seems to be really talkative, then there's maybe 3 other people in the room who feel like they didn't get to voice their opinions and concerns. So we do try to keep it to be intimate groups. But if you feel like someone has been left out, please get that information to staff so that she can coordinate and see if they are available on that date to participate. In terms of the questions for stakeholders, we, as the sheet states, we don't ask every question. We do tailor it to the specific group, and we let it be somewhat organic. The participants are provided the questions in advance, so they kind of know what we're looking for, and it gives them time to think about what they might want to say and add. And then we kind of let it organically move and shift for each particular group. So, you know, one particular group might spend a lot of time talking about uses, and another group might talk a lot about, you know, wanting landscaping or lighting or signs and different things like that. The thing that I will say that's interesting is that typically out of all the groups, there are still running themes through all of them. So even though people come in from very different backgrounds, very different knowledge, we typically always see some running ideas and running themes, and we bring those back to you all. But are there any comments, changes that you do want for the questions? Heather?
Thank you, Heather. Mr. Parker?
I'll open it up to the planning commissioners if y'all have any comments. Yes, sir.
I don't know how to address this, but one thing that one issue I encounter as I travel around, look at other planning commissions and other developing areas and developed areas in our situation, waterfront and others, it's a question of by right development. The question is, I was wondering a way to put that question on the survey. Do you support by right development or not? But then to explain to the layperson what it means and its implications. But I think that's a community response, whether we should be a by right community or not. And frankly, some of the best developed areas in terms of land use, property values, and tourism are not by right.
Well, so by right is illegal. I don't know if we can really do much with that because it's a legal element, right?
How do you mean legal?
If I've got 500 acres, then by right, it's A1, and by right I can split it into 50 10-acre lots. By right, that's a legal. If I can get the infrastructure, and that's a legal allowable use of my land. I don't know that we can.
Legal by ordinance, legal by state statute, legal by
state statute, correct?
Based on how it's zoned, how the property is owned, right?
I think it is in there.
Mr. Golsky?
That's a very complex and detailed area that really comes down to a lot of, situational specifics as to what zoning is in place, and then if you try to change it and do other things. So it's a moving target. So I would just leave it at that at this stage, and agree that by right is a very complex term.
There is a question that I read that asked, I forget which questionnaire it was, whether it was public or stakeholder. I think it was stakeholder. Do you feel that there are more projects that should be approved administratively rather than board or planning commission? Would that satisfy your concern?
Yeah, it's number 4 right there under development review process, Mr. DeVries. You're spot on.
Does that question satisfy your concern, Mr. DeCordo?
No, it was that entry on there that triggered my question, because the flip side of by right is by wrong. If you wanted to put a spaceport on 500 acres of A2, you couldn't. If you wanted to put I don't know, it's just, it both constrains future opportunities as well as puts railroad tracks to a Stafford County development.
Every district does have by right uses. So I guess we would be examining those by right uses district by district as we go through this process, won't we?
Yeah, so that will be a part of the stakeholder questions. You'll see, let's see if I can get to which, right below, under uses and districts, item 2, we have listed some particular uses that we would talk to the stakeholders about, but certainly anything else that they want to bring up and say, hey, this isn't allowed in the county right now, and it should be provided as a use. And then we can talk about, okay, do you think that use should have some conditions that go with it? Should there be special permitting, or should that be a by right use? And then as we get into drafting the uses, currently right now your ordinance has all of the uses listed with each district. And what we're talking about is putting them in a matrix where all of the uses are together so that you could find, if you're interested in one particular type of use or business, you could find that item in the chart and then see exactly, okay, in which district is it allowed? Which district is it allowed by right? Which district, requires it to be a special exception, or where is it not allowed? So those things are things that we will work through this process.
Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one thing, personal property rights cover or rise above anything else, in my opinion. So by right means if someone owns a piece of property or has procured a piece of property under the current zoning, they're allowed to do what's allowed under that current zoning. That's by right. We as a governing body cannot step on someone's personal property rights. They have a saying that, hey, if you're concerned about the property next door to you, buy it. If you don't own it, it's not within your world. Now, outside of by right development, there are those who may want to do something and they have to go through a process that we already have in place through our special exceptions permitting process. And that's something that goes through the Planning Commission, goes through the board, and there's things that are outlined in there. And I'm fine with that. Now, if in this review process for our ordinances, we want to expand on those by right uses, or if we want to pull back on those by right uses, that's up for future debate and work sessions between the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. But as it stands right now, if someone owns a piece of property, they acquired a piece of property under what was allowed at the time that they acquired that property, it's their God-given right to do what they want with their personally owned property, as far as I'm concerned, and under the current letter of the law. So that's my only comments, Madam Chair. Thank you.
I'd just like to respond to that. It's at the time of purchase. Thank you for that clarification. At the time of purchase, under the conditions of the transaction, it includes those rights. No question about that. Looking forward is my perspective.
Mr. Granger. Good. Okay. Mr. Watkins, did you have something to add? Okay. All right. Anyone else have, I know we went out of order, Ms. Bender, because Mr. Bush had a point he wanted to make, so I did call upon him first. So I'll put it back to supervisors' comments regarding the stakeholder survey questions. Mr. Stonehill? All right. Ready to move on. Thank you.
So that's all that we have for immediate discussion tonight, unless, you have any questions about the process overall. We're happy to answer any of that. Do you have anything else to add? So we'll just thank you for your time.
All right. Any other questions from the Planning Commission that may not have exactly fit in the certain place in the agenda where we covered it? Please, Mr. Parker, go ahead.
Anything from the commissioners?
The selection of the stakeholders, but it was answered and they said that we can add or discuss. And so when that comment was brought up, I was good.
One thing I would like to add about that is if you could do that quickly, because we do need to confirm those. I think we're trying to get it confirmed and get those invites out by September 21st or something like that, I think is the date in my mind. So yeah, if we could just solidify that so that we can get it on everyone's calendar that needs to be there.
So let's not discuss. Yeah, we're not gonna go there publicly. But if we could, Ms. Hall, if you could send out an email to both boards with a stop date, asking for your feedback, whether that's someone that you think perhaps is ill-suited to be on the list, or those who may have been missed that need to be added to the list, so that we can get it back to them in time for them to meet their deadline, please. Thank you. General, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In review of the business owners, So I'll be general. 1/3 reflects one realty company. So 1/3 of the people on this list all come from one singular realty company. So I find that as an imbalance. That's just a point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just add something?
Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
If you could add something to what you just said as well, and I appreciate Mr. Bush's comments. Could we have a date, a deadline that, we're not going to, and actually, like a number, a cap, so that we're not getting 75 stakeholders, that we went from 10 to 75 or whatever. I mean, I think we need to definitely get to make sure that the stakeholders are representatives of all the groups, of the folks that have had some concerns. I know some of the supervisors have indicated that they want to make sure that there are folks that get an opportunity to be a part of this process. And that was the reason for the multiple meetings. So I think we just need to make sure that the groups that are on there are representative, and that they can actually, in a sense, speak for that group, that industry. And I think that's important, because obviously we can't have 27,000 people in this process, but we can find representatives of the group.
So you said you need your info back by September 21st, or what was the September 21st again?
So we are trying to confirm by September 21st, so that it allows everyone a little more time to get it on their calendars, make sure that they can attend. If need be, we can scooch that a little bit.
So Ms. Hall, if you could send the email first thing tomorrow morning, and then by Monday, the 20th?
We can go a week from today that we receive,
you're okay?
Have a finalized list by the 22nd, which is week from today.
Okay. And then what's the cap? What starts to get unwieldy for you all to have to manage?
10 to 12 is usually a plenty in a group. And I say 12 because you invite 10 and maybe a couple of people can't make it. And so we understand that. And so we're willing to, scooch the numbers a little bit where we have to. But yeah, more than that, if everyone were to show up, definitely is hard to work with. But, and I would say if there are people that you feel like want to participate, let them know about the survey, let them know about the workshops. Those are also really good opportunities to participate and provide input as well, even if they are not a stakeholder.
Thank you. Does that work for you, Mr. Miller? Very good. Good question. Thank you. All right. Anything else?
Nothing.
Last call, Mr. Parker.
We're good over here. Thank you.
Yes?
Thank you, Ms. Kupka.
Okay. Supervisors? Anyone else?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. Staff? Do you have any other concerns we need to raise at this point in time? All right. With that, Mr. Parker.
That we will conclude the 15 September joint meeting of the King George County Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors on this side. And actually, I'll ask for a motion that the meeting be adjourned. Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Do I have a motion?
I move to adjourn until Tuesday, September 21st at 6:30 p.m. in the boardroom.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned.